I just want to acknowledge for everyone that I am a cisgendered gay man on an episode about the transgender experience. So tonight, I'm just going to try to kind of facilitate the conversation between you two. Even though we all have a stripe on the same flag, tonight it's all about you two. So let's get into this, Stephanie. When did you when did you start to realize that you were different inside that out, that your assigned gender didn't match how you felt inside?
Um, as soon as I had any consciousness of what an internal feeling of gender was, really. I mean, one could almost say I came out when I was 3.5. When I was 2.5, I rather severely burned my left foot, and one of the exercises that I had to do in physical therapy to make sure that things stayed loose was pick
Yeah.
up marbles off the floor. And uh, so my mom would throw out marbles on the floor, and I'd pick them up and put them in a cup. And at one point in the exercise, she said, "Good boy," and I said, "No, girl." So a 3.5-year-old doesn't really have
Wow.
the language, right?
Hmm.
You don't have the language to talk about, well, the internal feeling of blah, 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 blah. Or trans in 1957 was not even on anybody's uh, radar screen. So it's like almost since forever. And I wish that um, that expression had gone a little bit better, but it, uh, people didn't have a framework to even attempt to understand that any more than I did as a 3.5-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a bit of a shock to the system, I think, for my mom. And being a preacher's kid, she didn't share that particular thing with my dad, the minister guy. Uh, but she did share it with her sister. And as I in later in life, in conversations with my cousin, her you know, my mom's sister's kid, said,
Right.
"Oh yeah, we all knew what was going on. We didn't understand it, but we did. We were all aware of that stuff." So I guess that I hope that answers the question, like from the get.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like they didn't really have the language for it, maybe, or hadn't been exposed to it, but already could tell that you were different and you were not comfortable in that assigned gender for sure. How did that affect your childhood, like your early years? What I know you talked about this just a little bit, but tell us more about the zeitgeist back then towards the trans community.
Well, I was born in 1953 when Christine Jorgensen hit the front pages of the New York Times, uh, who was the first prominent person to undergo genital reconstruction surgery, or GRS. So there was that stuff in the media. There was, uh, from the point of view of gender nonconforming people, you'd see Uncle Milty uh, cross-dressing. Milton Berle was a feature of his show. Um, it was sort of a like nobody really knew what to do with it. What is the deal? I mean, in psychotherapy, in the psychiatric community, in the health community, there was a guy named Harry Benjamin
Hmm.
who was active at that time, but he was pretty much the only person in those days taking cognizance of the fact that this part of the human condition existed, and had a compassionate approach to treatment, such as it was. So, I mean, I guess that was the cultural context, and of course, at that time, uh, uh, homosexuality was still illegal in many places in the world.
Right.
Gender nonconformity just wasn't it just wasn't a thing, and that lasted through the 50s and the 60s until later 60s. And there were some cultural shifts, but trans people were always kind of on the outs. And since there was no awareness and broader cultural awareness, uh, I was raised the impossible child. I was impossible. I couldn't be. It was effectively a form of conversion therapy, even though it wasn't conversion therapy. There just weren't any options. So I was trained to really to hate a part of myself, which wasn't the best thing.
Yeah, I think that's I think a really common trans experience. I mean, I was born in 95, and I would say that that was a large part of how I was able to repress my gender identity for so long, was that I was taught to hate it, that those parts of me were bad and they were meant to be suppressed and kept deep down because they were bad. So that definitely is I think I'm sure there are even still families today where that kind of mindset is alive and well. Hopefully less so, but still in some sense,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems like every day I see something in the news about some trans kid being kicked out, for coming out to their family, and it's almost always religious reasons. And you came from a pretty religious family. I think a lot of our audience can relate to that. I can relate to that. How did that affect your faith, Stephanie?
Oh, I found a way of eliding the going to Sunday school stuff, because I came to the conclusion pretty early, like when I was 11 or 12, that
Mm-hmm.
God wouldn't, if there couldn't possibly be a God who would play this kind of trick on me. I just didn't, it was just sort of like, no, don't believe it. I mean, I had tried all the prayers, right? I'd
Yeah.
asked to, uh, please make me whole, and there was just no answer. So it was a sort of wandering away from faith, and yeah, I'd go around as soon as my folks would let me. I would say, I'm going to go. Grew up in Boston. So I would walk out, and I did actually do this. I went around to various churches just to see what other how other sermons were preached, how other people outside of the Methodist Church
Mm-hmm.
uh, conducted themselves in a religious sense. And I found my greatest inspiration was just simply walking around in on the Boston Common, and walking in the public gardens, and just sort of breathing in and breathing out. So yeah, I didn't hold on to faith very long, but I made a good show of it. I learned a lot about various religions, and so was able to participate in those Sunday dinner discussions with my mom and dad. I mean, my growing up was sort of you get up in the morning and you sit at the breakfast table and read the Upper Room, which was a religious publication, and that you go with the daily Bible verse and stuff. So yeah, but I didn't buy it. I was pretty done with it early on.
Arden, were you raised religious?
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. our denomination was kind of complicated. We were technically a Church of God, but we practiced like Pentecostals. It was very like the Bible is the literal word of God. So yeah, I definitely got a heavy indoctrination, but just like Stephanie, I can't tell you how many times I lied awake, like sad at night, praying like, please let me wake up in the morning. I remember even asking once, like, if you let me wake up tomorrow as a girl, live my whole life as a girl, and then when I die, I come back to this moment, like I will be okay. Just let me, like, please let me be a girl. And those unanswered prayers were they spoke pretty loudly. I think that was definitely a part of the deconversion process.
When I was 6, I left a note under my pillow for the tooth fairy, saying, "Please let me be a girl." And so I related that story to my shrink, and of course, this is what I got from after GRS from my psychiatrist. She sent this, and it's like, oh man, it's the coolest thing. See the teeth, it's little tooth necklace, all that stuff.
That's so cute. That's really sweet.
That is really sweet. That's like super thoughtful. Wow. What sort of, like, you mentioned your therapist, what sort of terminology did they use back then to describe it? Like what language was going around? Did you have other resources? And
until I stuffed all the trans stuff way deep down. I did get married. I didn't have kids. We didn't have kids. My ex is still my best friend. The reason that we didn't stay together was because she didn't want to be a lesbian, and I can understand that. And it's like she always saw that part of me, but when the shit hit the fan, it was like, I just can't do it. And I totally got that. We parted amicably. The partnership broke apart amicably. And as I say, she's still my best friend. So, yeah, I transitioned. I started transitioning at the age of 44. It took me that long to get to the point where it was something I could do. So that's like 23 years ago. I'm 67 now. So, but I have no idea what would have happened had the possibilities that exist for kids today have been available to me now.
Right.
My life would have been hugely different, I'm sure. But I don't have any real regrets, and what I have a tremendous amount of joy that I've had the past 23 years to live, like, without any pretense.
Yeah, I think that's a really hard place to get to. I think because so many people really get, and I completely understand why, get really caught up on all those years that they missed, and I think there's so much beauty in being able to appreciate that, like, the privileges that we do have, and that you've gotten those years to be yourself and to live wholly. That's really precious, and I think it's good to put the focus on that and really raise that up, because I think that is invaluable. And even though maybe it was put off longer than it would have been if you grew up like today or something, I'm always reminded of, like, how early I got to transition. What a blessing that is. Blessing, excuse the word blessing. I mean that metaphorically, chat. I know we're in an atheist show. Metaphor. But I think about just like people who, in centuries before lived and died, never getting to understand themselves or why they felt the way they did, or maybe hiding their feelings and expressing it in secret ways or something. And it's really fantastic that we are able to be ourselves at all. Small things, silver linings.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that things maybe possibly are kind of getting better by the sound of things. What would you say to teenage Stephanie if you could talk to her for 2 minutes?
Oh, I have done that in my mind. I've done
I'm
that
sure.
a
I'm
lot.
sure. Well, for the rest of our audience who might be, younger, trans, what advice would you give to them?
What I would say to 17, 18, 19-year-old me,
Mhm.
or even younger, is it's going to be okay. It's just that. It's going to be okay.
Hmm.
You'll figure this out. Because she
That's
did. That little girl figured it out. Took her a long time to grow up, but she finally did.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I definitely think the pre-transition stage can be full of so much darkness. I know that was the worst times in my life, and I'm reflecting on that. It was miserable for a lot of it. And while I understand that it's not for everyone, I think yeah, that's a great message to reflect on, that like it does, as corny as it sounds, it does get better, with time. Yeah.
And you transitioned fairly early, you said, Arden? Or well, earlier.
Yeah. My story's a little weird. I transitioned actually really young. I first came out at about 14, but went through some pretty traumatic experiences in high school and detransitioned because I was like, if this whole experience is just going to be me getting harassed and bullied, and I'm gonna get death
Right.
threats, and every like romantic partner I have is gonna tell me they wish they could be with me, but it's too hard. And I was like, well, fuck it, I will just stuff it down even deeper. And I repressed it again for another like 5 or 6 years. So I have like, I feel like I consider my coming out, my real coming into myself, was at about 22, 23. So about 3 or 4 years ago now. Yeah.
That's such a common, like, I hear you both say that, stuff it down, jam it down. And I hope that content like this sort of helps the audience to say, to see that's not healthy, and that there are options, and that, you need to make it match before you'll be happy. Because you both seem like you're much happier after getting it fixed.
No
No.
comparison.
Yeah.
Speaking to the agonies of puberty, I will say that that was a particularly difficult time. My 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 Twitter feed little blurb goes, epigenetic chromosomal anomaly. It's like I did not enter male puberty until quite late, and in like 7th and 8th grade, guys would come up to me. I was somewhat overweight, and I also had small breasts. There was some breast development there, and so guys would come up to me and grab me by the tits and twist, like on a daily basis. And so I sort of I really withdrew from interactions. Previously, most of my friends were girls, and it was just fucking torture. And I didn't really come back out into society, among my peers, until like junior in high school, where found I found music and arts and drama and stuff like that. And that was good training for putting on the act. But
I suppose it would be, yeah.
Yep. I was always into drama too. That makes sense.
That does make sense. Yeah.
Wicked tough time. But saved a lot of money on electrolysis later though.
What was your experience like with healthcare providers? Were they supportive? Did you have to go through a few? Tell us about that a little bit.
When I did actually, I started medical transition sort of on the down low, because I'd come to a mental understanding that I couldn't do this anymore. So I started cross-sex hormones in 1998, and I was acquiring them through not necessarily direct means, shall we say. But I finally got to the point where it's like, well, I got to get real about this. And I contacted a therapist who is very, very good, who is like, she had a practice, strangely enough, in the house across the street from the house I grew up in.
Oh,
wow.
So I would sit for therapy sessions, look down the hill, and there's my house. My childhood home. It was really, really one of these weird coincidences in life. So anyway, I started seeing her, and I went to my physician, who I'd known for ages, and I took a box of estradiol patches and a bottle of spironolactone into the office with him. I'd made the appointment. I need to talk to you for why reasons. I walk into his office with it and show him this and show him that, and said, I need these. Will you work with me? And to my great delight, he said yes. So that's how, so we were embarking on a journey together. He to this day, I don't believe he has another trans patient, but he was incredibly compassionate and incredibly supportive. I mean, he basically said, "You're going to do this anyway, aren't you?" I go, "Damn straight I am." He goes, "Then let's do it right." So that was a good part. I was very lucky, very, very lucky, because that's not the way that stuff worked back then. It was not, there was no self ID. The Harry S. Benjamin standards of care, the DSM-3 at the time was like, it was considered a mental disorder to be trans, and it wasn't even the separation of transness, qua transness, and gender dysphoria hadn't happened. Like in the DSM-5, gender dysphoria is the condition that gets treated.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget what the code was, although I should remember, because it's always caused problems with insurance companies and whatnot. But one of the things about being trans is you have to know a whole lot more than most of the doctors you meet about your condition, or about and means of treatment, what's actually going to work and make you feel better. So I don't know. So I've been very lucky with long story short, I've been very lucky with medical professionals. I had the therapist I mentioned was great. I had another therapist, a psychiatrist, closer to home up here, in Maine, and she was terrific. Jean Schrang, my surgeon, was terrific. I've been really, really lucky.
That's so awesome to hear. There are definitely so many horror stories about, you know, people being like told like, oh, you're not wearing the right clothes. Like, especially back in the day of the Harry Benjamin standards, if you didn't dress the right way or, you know, accessorize the right way, sometimes you could get denied access to healthcare. And it's like, wait, hold on. My aunt wears exclusively flannel and like does not dress very feminine, but I have to dress like that in order to get healthcare. Like that's insane. So that's amazing that you had healthcare providers who were clearly understanding of at least what you needed. And I love that notion of like, well, look, you're gonna take this medicine anyway. So I may as well be there to support you to make sure that we do it right and that you are healthy and not putting your safety at risk by doing these things. That's awesome.
Yeah, he's a good doc. He's still my doctor. You know,
That's incredible. That's so great. I love hearing stories like that.
That's a real professional. You know, that's somebody who should be in the medical field and clearly is good at what he does. That's nice to hear.
I mean, he didn't know it. You know, he didn't know anything about it. I you know, along with the 2 prescriptions, I walked in with a sheath of papers saying, "Well, if we can work together, here's the stuff." Because I knew that was going to be his next question. It's like, what? You know, I'll need to do some research. Okay, start here.
Yeah, for sure. That's so crazy. It's the patient educating the doctor when it comes to this stuff. Did you have that experience too, Arden?
Oh, all the time. All the time. I can't tell you how many times I've had to explain to a doctor like anything from like the efficacy of transition to like the potential risks. Like I might know more about the potential risks and side effects of HRT than they do. Or like I've had sometimes when I'm talking about getting like gender affirming surgeries, doctors who will be like, oh, well, let's be careful about that because, you know, you don't want to like regret it or whatever. And I'm like, trust me, I know exactly what procedures I'm looking to get. I know exactly why I need them. I looked at like the regret rates and all of these things. I know what I'm doing, but there's a lot of unfortunately, just uneducated professionals still in the field. I think that's becoming less and less of a problem, but a lot of these things are still issues that we see all the time in the trans community. I mean, and even if you have educated professionals, you have situations like in the UK where if you want to go through the NHS, you're going to have to wait, 4 to 6 years to access treatment, which is just absurd and should be considered a I don't know, malpractice or something. I don't know how law works in the UK. That's not the point, but just that a lot of people think trans care is like a cosmetic thing. I just want to feel pretty. I just want to look pretty, and it's really not. It's about bringing an alignment between two things that for most people are already aligned. They don't really have to do a lot of work to make those things happen.
Right.
That's
fair.
One of my first lines when talking to people was, "It's not about the clothes.
Yeah,
it's got nothing to do with clothes. Not for me." And as it turns out, you sort of get there a little bit. It's kind of fun to play. It's fun to play with gender. It's fun to grow into. It's fun to feel like you can grow into your own style. It's like learning how to dance again, and being joyous about it. It's quite a trip. But I guess what I'm trying to convey is a lot of us feel our gender identity quite deeply.
Yeah,
and
course.
Don't know how to express it. We learn how to express it as we grow into it, to the extent that it's allowed to be expressed. And the conflict between the dissonance between our deeply felt identity and the permission to express it is the thing that causes so many people so much pain and angst and trouble.
Yeah.
Which
Well
is,
said.
you know, as society becomes a little bit more accepting about gender fluidity, it gets better. But for those of us who are trans and gender fluid, there's a little bit more. There might be a little bit more work to do, but everybody's path is different.
Yeah.
For sure.